The Bicycle Frame Builder's Apprentice, Chapter 16. Connie stood astride her bike, looking back. Tom and his dad were on the tandem, parked immediately behind her. The rest were making their way towards them. They were now on the last leg of their journey, having regained the Rush-Up Edge Road and reached its highest point. Right, they've almost caught up. OK, start off, Connie, but stay close in. There's a car turning out of the lane from Mam Nick. It'll be passing us soon. She set off. Malc waited for a second and then followed suit. His timing was such that young Mikey had jumped on his back wheel. By the time they built up speed at the beginning of the long downhill stretch, a car towing a caravan had joined the first vehicle in overtaking them. Not so long after, Malc rode alongside Connie and reminded her they'd need to be prepared for the right turn into the lane to Wash by the Otter Centre. She nodded agreement, and he drifted back to his original position in her wake. The pace continued to increase, and the riders began to string out behind. Another vehicle overtook them, this time a Land Rover towing a trailer. The effect on Connie was electric. She turned her head, shouting at Malc and gesticulating, before beginning to sprint. He only just caught the words sheep thieves, but they were sufficient. He set off in pursuit, more concerned about Connie's safety than catching sheep thieves, and animated Tom, sensing his extra efforts were also needed. The frame builder's initial reaction had been that they had no chance of getting anywhere near close to the Land Rover. If they'd been further down the hill, where the road was at its steepest and descended in a series of sweeping bends, it would have been different. He soon caught Connie and rode alongside, intending to persuade her to slow down, but she pointed ahead triumphantly. "We can catch them if we try. Quick, Malc." He doubted she was right. The Land Rover was a good 200 metres away, but Connie had realised something he hadn't. Once again she redoubled her efforts, and once again she began to leave him as she accelerated downhill. He sprinted forward in hot pursuit and finally caught and overtook her. Connie expertly jumped on his back wheel to take advantage of his slipstream. Malc now realised the youngster had been right. The Land Rover had visibly slowed down. The gap between them had noticeably decreased. Maybe they could catch it, but what then? An idea began to form in the frame builder's mind. The gap was now reducing fast, the Land Rover's way ahead impaired by the car and caravan. Moreover, cars travelling in the opposite direction made it impossible for it to overtake the obstacle, assuming its driver might want to. He, presumably, would have no knowledge he was being chased. By the time the road began to curve around the bends, Malc was having to brake just to remain behind the vehicle. Much to his alarm, Connie pulled out and appeared on his offside. "We must get past them," she urged. "No," he shouted back. "There are 3 different sets of junctions coming up. We don't know which way they're heading." Connie frowned but drifted behind him again. Nonetheless, she had a peculiar look in her green eyes. They'd narrowed to slits like those of a particularly angry and frustrated wildcat. Malc's head momentarily turned to Tom for a second, and he said something over his shoulder. Tom nodded. Connie began to pull out once more, intent on making a move, whatever her elder mentor advised. Much to her consternation, she realised Malc was braking again. He had no alternative. The trailer's brake lights were glowing a bright red. The Land Rover was slowing down fast. She decided to overtake, but as soon as she began to accelerate, the Land Rover's indicator lights began to flash. It was preparing to take the right-hander to Wash. She could see the driver's eyes glaring at her in his wing mirror. Undeterred, she shot forward, certain she could get in front of the vehicle, enter the lane first, and hold it up. Malc looked on in horror, feeling completely helpless. The Land Rover was beginning to turn right, and Connie was now alongside it. A collision seemed certain, but Connie wasn't beaten yet. The entrance to the lane is quite wide, so as to enable farm tractors and long trailers to access it from the main road in both directions. In the middle of this meeting point is a small green with a large old tree at its centre. The young girl swooped into the lane to the right of the tree, much to the annoyance of a motorist exiting the auto centre. The Land Rover and trailer went to the left. Unfortunately, or perhaps luckily for the youngster, depending on your point of view, the lane divides into two again on the other side of this small green, the entrance to Slackhall Farm lying in between. Malc knew the two lanes eventually met again before Wash, but only after climbing steeply. The Land Rover took the left, ploughing its way up the single track road, scraping the errant branches of the overhanging hedgerows. Connie tried to follow, but having gone to the right, she'd had to brake hard before turning left in front of the farm. She'd lost all momentum and finally gave up the chase, realizing that despite all her efforts, any chance of catching the vehicle and its thieving occupants had disappeared. No matter how fast she was uphill, the Land Rover was faster. Malc and Tom quickly joined her. "Don't look so downhearted, Connie. We'll go in the cafe." He pointed through the open gates of the auto centre. "I don't need any tea," she exploded. "I need to catch the thieves." "And so you shall." "What do you mean? How can I? They've got clean away again. That's the 4th time." "Tell her, Tom. AKJF. AKJF? What are you talking about?" Malc laughed. "Put 853 after the J and before the F and tell the police. It's the Land Rover's registration number. There's a phone in the cafe. Ask them if you can use it. Dial 999. He held out his hand for her bite. Connie handed it over and began to run. Tom clambered off the tandem and followed, more than a little excited. Dad had told him he was intent on enjoying a nice quiet day before they set out. Meanwhile, Malc, his legs straddling the tandem and holding Connie's bike, remained stuck in the lane until the others caught up and rescued him from his predicament, or another vehicle heading for Wash appeared on the scene. He hoped, if it should be a motorist first, it wouldn't be one of those whose brains switched off whenever the car's ignition key was turned on. Somewhere high above, the burbling cry of a curlew echoed across the valley.